But that's the world that we see, a world that Israel didn't exist for 2,000 years, and now it does. This is one of the most dramatic series of prophecy ever to come true in all of history, and it's come true in our lifetime, and you're sitting in Jerusalem.
What is the real-life experience of families moving to Israel and living in Israel? Antisemitism is increasing around the world, and many Israelis have chosen to come back to their homeland to find respite. But it's not always easy. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Inside the Epicenter with Joel Rosenberg, a podcast of the Joshua Fund, a ministry dedicated to blessing Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus. I'm Carl Moeller, Executive Director of the Joshua Fund, and today we present Joel's insights into his own family moving to Israel, their challenges, and their everyday living experience. Let's listen to Joel.
First, I just want to ask, how many of you have ever been to Israel before? Okay, just a few. So everyone else, never been here before. So welcome to all of you, and especially to the returners. That's very fun. But welcome to those who've never been here before. It really is very, very special for both Faith Winds and Joshua Fund to welcome you, to host you. I was chatting with some of the folks at this table about whether they've been here or not, and they said, wow, the Sea of Galilee was so amazing, but now coming here. That's what Peter from New Hampshire was saying. Just coming here. I said, to this particular restaurant, this is nice. And it's, so, you know, they're going to want you up on their wall in a few moments. But he said, yeah, I meant broadly Jerusalem. But it is pretty amazing. His wife said, several of them said it's surreal to be here. And it is surreal. And I want to start out by just talking about the fact that 9 years ago today, Lynn and I and our 4 sons and Lynn's mom landed here in Israel. All of us except her mom, we were becoming dual U.S. Israeli citizens. So we're dual. We didn't give up our U.S. citizenship to become Israelis. But that also means we can vote twice. It's like living in Chicago. And you don't even have to be dead. So that's nice. You're a semi-political crowd, so you're okay with that. And I don't think anyone's from Chicago anyway, so I don't mean to offend. But you know it's true. So this is actually a very special day for us, because this journey, is the exact journey, except with a little bit better, more technology, that Abram and Sarah were told, hey, leave your country, leave your father's house, leave all your relatives, all your friends, and go to a place that I will show you. We now understand why they did not have children at that time, okay? Because I think that, Abram and Sarah were like, God said to them, listen, I know you don't have any children yet. I know that's very difficult. You're going to have to trust me on this. I'm going to give you a promised child, but you don't want to bring teenagers into the Holy Land on your first go round. It's not going to go well. Just going to have to trust me on this. It's been very challenging, but then we've come through it. All the boys came with us, and 3 of them had to because they were underage, and they didn't have a choice. But we had prayed about it as a family. We had really sensed that the Lord was calling Lynn and I, and so we talked about it as a family. We'd had, Lynn homeschooled for most of their education, so we had morning devotions together. We studied through books of the Bible. They understood God's heart for Israel and the neighbors, and this seemed like a great adventure. And then we got here. And for a while in the early days, I would tell audiences in the United States or in Asia or wherever I'd go, yeah, the honeymoon didn't last that long. And I'd get home and Lynn like, what honeymoon? There was no honeymoon. Pretty much the kids went into depression pretty quickly. Look, most Jews who are being brought back here by God to resettle in the land, according to all the prophecies that God said it would happen, they're mostly coming because they feel in danger. They feel physically threatened, or that the threat is building and that it's better or economically threatened. But it's usually not just economic, and it's usually not just political. If you look at Jewish history of living in countries where the political situation, the economic situation, the social situation, the religious freedom issues are going south rapidly, but they won't leave. Just look at Germany, look at Austria, look at Poland. Like the handwriting was on the wall, in some cases literally, and people didn't want to leave. Some did, of course, and some went to the United States, and some came here. But generally, Jews have to feel quite endangered to come back. Now, some Jews come here to settle here because they have a strong religious sense, or they have a strong political Zionist sense. This is what I should do. But if you look at that percentage-wise in terms of the vast, usually it's a mixture. And the motivating factor ultimately is, I am not safe. My family's not safe. Our future is not secure in this country. Why are French Jews coming here in large numbers? The second highest number of Jews, and some years it's the highest percentage of Jews making aliyah. That's the term of coming to become citizens here. You think France is lovely. Like, who doesn't want, all the French food and all the French wines? And because they're being beaten up on the streets if they wear a kippah, or even if they don't wear a kippah, increasingly, anti-Semitism is getting so bad in France that they feel like they have to come here. Now, this is first of it's fulfillment of prophecy. Anybody who's coming back here, but certainly we are glad that the French Jews are bringing their chocolateries, or whatever they're called, the boulangeries, the patisseries. All the E's are very, very nice, but it takes a while to integrate into Israel. Israel is not really so much a melting pot, although it's trying. But I just want to say that the reason I want to open with this idea that this is what God told us to do, and we were excited about it, and then most of our team was not excited about it. And the one who's probably the least excited about it, the one who turned and told me every day, you're ruining my life. And there were two of them, two of the four. We have Caleb, Jacob, Jonah, and Noah. Okay, so 28, 26, 24, and 19. You see a little gap between Jonah and Noah, and you say, well, that's almost 7 years, 6.5 years. Why did you have a Noah? And I'd like to say, because in Matthew 24, Jesus said, I'm not coming back again until the days of Noah. So we thought, if we're holding him back, we'd better have a Noah. And so now he's 19. He just graduated from high school, and he's heading off to uni in the UK, not far from Jeff and Naomi. So that's exciting. And that'll be just a few weeks from now. So Caleb, Jacob, Jonah, and Noah. So the two younger ones had the biggest problem with this. They all did in their various ways, but the two older they just handled tension and difficulties differently. And the two younger ones handled it differently, and they were a little more vocal and outspoken. But of course, if you name one of your kids Jonah, do you think he wants to go where God wants him to go, or he wants to get on the boat and go the exact opposite direction, west? I might add, right? So he one of his bugaboos about us as parents when he was younger was, oh, come on, Dad, you named me the worst prophet in the entire Bible. Why? Well, there's no redeeming value in this. I mean, this guy was horrible. He barely did what he was supposed to do and didn't want to do it and was angry with God. And when they repented, he was all furious. I mean, Lord, I knew you would do this. You'd save these people. Why would you? I said, honestly, we didn't even think about it. We just liked the movie, Jonah, VeggieTales. No, I'm just kidding. I can see you all have school-age children. No, I said, we didn't even really think about the resistance to God. I know that sounds funny. Our focus was Caleb was named because this was one of the spies that was going to come in and check out the land and see, all right, is the Lord really telling us to be here and to do this? And of course, the answer was yes. And of course, Jacob, he's the one who became Israel, right? The first time we hear the name Israel is because God is renaming Jacob Israel. And Jonah is the one who every day we see, we want to remember that God loves the neighbors of Israel, and he loves the enemies, and we're supposed to as well. Now, that's not easy to do. Most ministries don't try to bless Israel and her neighbors because it's hard. It's hard logistically, it's hard philosophically, it's hard in terms of fundraising, and it's hard to move money into countries that are very much on the Patriot Act watch list, and also it's complicated. And so usually the donor classes don't like to get mixed. These are two great tastes that don't always taste great together, okay? So anyway, but Jonah was supposed to be to remind us. So anyway, he used to browbeat his older brothers, you guys are older than 18, get on the plane, get out of here. You have a chance to go back to America. I would do it if I could. Go, be free, Oh my gosh, he had a gift of leadership, but didn't know how to use it. He thought it was the gift of browbeating and harassing and, berating. Anyway, but yet, God did something very special. He not only grew in his faith dramatically years ago, thank God, not just yesterday, but decided, yes, I will let myself be drafted into the army. I mean, when you're an immigrant, you don't really have a choice, but you could leave the country and they can't find you, and then you couldn't come back. But I mean, you could not serve. But he not only served in the army, but he wanted to be recruited into one of the most elite special forces units, and that's what happened, and served well and with distinction. And when you raise sons, some of whom have served in the Israeli army, you really become an Israeli. Now, our Hebrew is terrible. Mine's much worse than Lynn's, meaning, anyway, I'm a classic immigrant father who's like, wait, what did they say? What did they say? And so that's been a challenge. But all of my business life and ministry life is all in English. So could it be in Hebrew? Yeah, I could. And did I study it? Yes, I did. But, we moved here 9 years ago. I'm 56. So, my mid-40s, a successful author. My audience wasn't in Israel. My books are still not sold here. So my audience is not here. So Lynn used to tease me, did you make Aliyah to Israel or to United Flight 70, 71, 90, 91? Like I was on the plane all the time because that's where my audience was, that's where my market was, and that's where most of our ministry was, because the Joshua Fund focuses, of course, here, but my focus is on educating and mobilizing Christian young people and lay people and pastors and ministry leaders, which is, people outside of Israel to understand and get involved in what's going on here. So I just give you that a little bit of overview because it's been quite the journey. Noah was the second most fearsome and feisty about being here. And yet he's gotten the language, he's made friends, he's really settled out. And he's going to go to university in England, but I'm very excited about how well he's adjusted. But it's been challenging. But why? Why did God call us here? I honestly can't tell you a specific reason. There are a set of reasons. And one of the things that rings in my ears to this day, and probably always will, I probably have a little PTSD from how hard it was for my boys and how much they expressed that, how hard it was to us, was can't you do what you do from anywhere? Why do we have to live here? You're an author. You could, as long as you have a laptop, you could be anywhere on the planet. Why do we have to live here? You run the Joshua Fund, but you don't actually run it day to day, right? Carl wasn't with us yet, but there's a team. There's a great team that does this. Why do you have to live here? And that whole set of issues, and that was all true. I didn't have to do it, except there was one issue, and that was God told us to do this, and we tested that, and we prayed about that, and we said, well, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we've just had a bad falafel that night. Maybe how do we really know? But when the Lord speaks and he makes it clear and he gives you multiple signs and confirms it in your heart, then even members of our own family didn't want us to do this. And then when it was hard for the boys, they're like, see, like this, you don't have to do this, which was hard because they're all in ministry themselves. They all believe in the Great Commission. So like, Mom, Dad, you got to be kidding me. You brought us up to believe in Matthew chapter 28. You're in full-time ministry. How is disobeying God so that to make your life easier? Where are we reading this? We're not reading this. But I will say that Americans don't move to Israel to become citizens much. If you look at all the nationalities, it's why? Because American Jews don't feel in danger. Now that's changing. Antisemitism is rising in the United States. But generally speaking, America is the safest, best place for Jews in the history of mankind. And Jews have never had more freedom, more opportunity, more welcomeness, and again, the fact that Jerry Seinfeld was the #1 star on television for 9 years, like, right? Are there pockets of anti-Semitism? Yes. Is it spiking in places? Yes. Is it going in the wrong direction? Yes. But Jews feel welcome in the United States, and so they'll come and visit. They'll come and send their kids to camp here. They'll buy an apartment, maybe. They'll bring their friends over. They'll come on a holiday, but they're not becoming citizens because why would you leave in the United States? This is a challenge for you, and I want to just actually open with this thought, which is all Jews are coming back to Israel. That's what Ezekiel 39 tells us, other verses as well. All Jews. God says, I will leave none of them out there. Now, it doesn't mean that Jews won't be able to travel to other places or do business or whatever, but God is going to bring us all back. Now, Lynn and I, we believe this, but we're part of it. But we also think, well, maybe not yet, Lord, because, the housing prices are crazy here and the traffic is off the charts, out of control. So maybe don't bring everybody yet. But that's where we're heading. And so if that's where we're heading, you think, well, what are the conditions going to be like for Jewish people in the United States that's going to become so bad, possibly in our lifetime, as you do ministry in the United States, that's going to be so bad that Jews are going to be like, I'm out. I can't do this. I've got to come to Israel. Because God spoke to the prophet Jeremiah in a very focused on prophecy. And he talked about Jeremiah was around when God was sending Nebuchadnezzar in to destroy Judah and to take, Jews captive and take them to Babylon and all. But Jeremiah also, fortunately, got the prophecies about I will bring you back. And one of the things it says is, first I will send the fishermen to lure you back, in a sense. But then I will send the hunters. In other words, God is not going to allow Jews to live outside Israel and disobey his call. He'll either call you in and you get reeled in, even if you're fighting, but you're still, doing it, or he will drive you here. He will force you to come. Just as he forces us out, he might have to force us back. And that's interesting because Jews aren't listening mostly to the Lord. That's our problem, right? You read the Bible. The whole book is our dirty laundry. We're stiff-necked. We're not listening to God. This is our biggest fault. And it's our biggest fault because it's our biggest blessing is that God is saying to us, I love you and I have a plan for you. Just listen to me and I will take care of you. Like, no, we can do it ourselves. It's not good. And so chronically not good. It's the entire Bible. So Jews from America tend not to come. So to come here, you begin to realize, wow, no wonder our kids wanted to turn around and leave, right? Even the Jews leaving slavery in Egypt, like, no, let's go back. Right? That was to slavery. Okay, leeks and onions, but okay. I mean, I'm not sure that's the, I joke that our kids were like, where's the Red Lobster? And so I joked that we were going to, we built a bunch of Red Lobsters with all of our last savings. And then we thought, how come there's no Red Lobster? Oh yeah, nobody really wants those, Or I don't know if you guys have Famous Dave's pork barbecue where you are. Like, no, they don't have that here. But apparently there's a reason for that. So anyway, every time our kids hit a cultural speed bump, a linguistic speed bump, a social speed bump, political maybe, or certainly food, they wanted to go home. That's not hard to understand, but it was hard to live with. And so, but God has been merciful, and we've gotten to see a lot of exciting things happen here. What I want to do tonight is just open it up. I mean, there's things I could teach, and I'll do some teaching on Thursday, Lord willing, and maybe on Friday as well. But tonight, I just wanted to share a little bit of that personal journey for us. And I want to just mention also some of the things we've seen spiritually that are going on in this country. And then I just want to open it up and see, you guys you're halfway through your trip already. You're hearing teaching, you're seeing things. And so there may be gaps or questions that are emerging that you want to ask about. So cook on that for a moment on the questions you might want to ask. But I just want to point out just a couple of quick things on some of the spiritual things we have observed. One of the things that's interesting about starting a ministry to bless Israel and our neighbors in the name of Jesus, according to the Abrahamic covenant, right? Genesis 12, 1-3, and to do that from Washington, D.C., where we lived for 24 years. And then we would come in to the land and visit and be involved in ministry projects, be involved in getting to know pastors and ministry leaders here, and then going back out, coming in, going out, coming, and then recruiting and training and sort of deploying a team to do that more than we could. Again, because most of my responsibility was educating and mobilizing, not actual direct ministry to the pastors and ministry leaders in the land, much less evangelism. And then Lynn, of course, was raising these 4 beautiful, wonderful, ornery kids, so bless their hearts. And but then to move here, suddenly you're not an outsider. You are, but you're trying to become part of the culture, part of the society, part of the body of believers. And wow, there is a wide range of differences in the body here. And again, you've got cultures. It's great you've got every country in the world had Jews living there. So now that many of those Jews are back, not all, but more Jews in the world live here now than live outside. Okay, so we're now, the percentage of Jews living in Israel is higher than Jews living outside. But the highest percentage of Jews living outside, that's there in the United States. But one of the things that's great for our intelligence services is that you got Jews that look like they're from China because they were in China for 1900 years or whatever. Then you got Jews from Iran. They're Persian. I mean, except they're Jews. They speak Farsi like perfectly because they're Iranian, but they're Jews. Well, that's great for our intelligence services. We have people who, from Ethiopia, they're black, and you're like, how are they Jewish? They are from India. I mean, it's really quite great. What's not yet happened is the church here is still fairly young and still fairly small and hasn't quite gotten the whole Matthew 28 Great Commission. We're supposed to be a light to the nations and take the gospel from Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria to the ends of the earth. I mean, if it's great for Israel's intelligence services to have Jews of all kinds, of all colors, of all languages and cultures to go out and gather information, wouldn't it be great for the church here, the body of Messiah, to have that same vision, except for the Great Commission? That vision is not really deep yet in the body here. Part of that is that's not taught much, but part of it is it's a small community. So it's not like you have 60 million evangelicals in the United States, and you're trying to encourage people to go, hey, yeah, this country has it. I mean, not enough people believe it or are living it, but why don't you go take the gospel someplace else? We need to get there. We're not there. But, there are only about 30,000 Jewish followers of Jesus in the entire land of Israel, right? The population is about 10 million here, but only about 30,000 are Jewish followers of Jesus, part of the Messianic community. And some of those, so I'm Jewish on my dad's side, not my mom's side. Lynn's not Jewish, but we would be considered part of the Jewish, the Messianic community. So there are some who are not Jewish but are married in or whatever. Of Arab evangelicals who are Israeli citizens, passport holders, that's about 4,000 to 5,000. So you have maybe a born-again believing community of about 35,000 or so, which is pretty small, right? All told, you'd probably have about 180,000 people who would call them, maybe 200,000 people who would call themselves Christians, and maybe, right? I don't know them all, first of all, and I don't know all their theology and how they're doing, but they may be from a Catholic background, an Orthodox background, but roughly 200,000 would call themselves Christians in Israel. But in terms of the sort of the core believing community, the way we would think of it, the way you would think of it, it's about 30, maybe 35,000. So that's pretty small. But where were we on May 14th, 1948, when Israel was prophetically reborn? There were 23 known Jewish followers of Jesus, like that section, in the whole country. And you're like, I thought the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. Well, they didn't, but they got pretty close. A lot of that was the Holocaust. But there were literally 23 Jewish followers that we know of, and there was a study done. And actually, we know some of the ones that are still alive, Lynn and I know them personally, which is pretty amazing. It's for you, it would be like knowing believers who were literally on the Mayflower and thinking they helped start the country, right? This is amazing. So where the country has come spiritually is pretty significant from where we were 75 years ago today, okay? Now, where are we going? We're going to Romans 11:26, where all Israel will be saved. Now, I don't believe that means that every Jew on the planet between now and the time Jesus comes back is going to be saved. I mean, we can get into it if you want, but I just want to say, I believe that means that the number of Jewish people getting saved will be more. We've certainly seen that worldwide, right? When I was born in 1967, there were fewer than 2,000 Jewish people in the world who believes in Jesus as Messiah. Fewer than 2,000, 56 years ago. And today, it's about 1 million. Okay, 871,000, based on a study that the Joshua Fund helped fund with the Southern Baptists about 5 years ago, 871,000 Jewish followers of Jesus in the United States alone. Add the 30,000 here, in Brazil, in Europe, elsewhere, and you get to approximately 1 million. That's pretty good. In a world of 17 million or so Jewish people, to have 1 million Jews who believe in Jesus is astonishing. There are more Jews who believe in Jesus today than at any other time in history, right? 2,000 years was never even close to this. So, and even Jews for Jesus and Chosen People Ministries didn't believe the numbers when they came in, and they helped us with the study. But they're like, wait, no, they can't. But it's because these Jews in America are not mostly going to Messianic congregations. They're mostly going to evangelical churches like yours. They're just part of the congregation. They don't think of themselves as, they're not emphasizing Jewishness, they're emphasizing Jesus. And if that's where they find the healthiest place to be, that's where they go. But some of the major Jewish ministries, the brand names that you know and are very effective in many ways, but they're focusing on Messianic congregations primarily. So they're not seeing these numbers. Most people in Messianic congregations, honestly, are Gentiles in the United States and elsewhere who are excited about Jews and excited about Jesus, and they want the worship and cultural experience of being Jewish, but they're not Jewish themselves. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, although some of these congregations are odd. I'm not saying all of them. I'm just saying some of them a little spooky town. And so you got to watch. It's just and so this is my last point I want to make. We are heading to a world in which all Jews get saved, but we're already there. We're in a world where we've gone from almost nobody to about 1 million. That's huge. And what I'm saying is even the heads of all the major messianic ministries are like, wow, we didn't see it. We didn't even realize that the gospel was having this much effect among Jews, at least in the United States and Canada, as it has been having, because we were focusing on where would they go, and we didn't see them showing up. But it turns out they were there. They were just hidden, as it were, in the evangelical church. So praise God, okay? So now we know the gospel works. We knew it anyway, but we know the curtain has gone up. Eyes are being opened. Jews are coming to faith in Jesus. And why is that? Because Jews feel safe in the United States, and they feel loved by their Christian neighbors. And their Christian neighbors are sharing the gospel with them. They're loving them unconditionally, whether they accept Jesus or not, but they're just being honest and they're sharing their faith. And that's where people are coming to faith. That's exciting. But where we're heading to, and I'll just wrap up with this and then go with your questions. There will, as we, we were talking a little bit about the rapture, and I said, you guys probably don't want the rapture to happen like today because you're like, hey, we're halfway through the trip. Can't we get to the end? We've been preparing for this. We've raised some money, whatever it took. Now we're here. Give us a couple more days. Anyway, no, they were all like, no, we're ready, especially if it's going to be this hot. But let's just pretend the rapture happens this week. I'm not saying it will. Just for the record, I didn't say it would. I'm saying just imagine for a thought exercise, okay? And I don't want to get all these, he said, no. So the Jews that have heard the gospel, a lot of people that the Joshua Fund has invested in the ministries that are sharing the gospel very effectively meaning they're planting seeds. You can't always see the fruit right away. But people who have heard the gospel, whenever it is that God removes the church, but let's say it's tonight, then the question is, what happens? How are these Jews going to get saved? Well, a lot of them have already heard the gospel. It just hasn't been activated. But it only takes the Holy Spirit a blink of an eye, right? The Apostle Paul heard the gospel from Stephen. He knew the scriptures. He just didn't get it until he did, right? Until the Holy Spirit just opened his eyes, till Jesus spoke to him. So the moment the rapture happens, a lot of Jews are going to come to faith in Jesus. A lot of the people that oppose us the most strongly, I think they're going to come to faith quickly. But then, throughout the tribulation, more and more Jews are going to get saved, right? There's going to be 144,000 Jewish Billy Grahams preaching the gospel, taking it all over. There's going to be 2 witnesses in front of a rebuilt temple preaching the gospel. Might be, who knows? Could be Moses, right? Could be Elijah. We don't really know. It doesn't say, but there's a plausibility to the one who represents the law saying, no, guys, you totally missed it. The law points us to the fact that we can't do the law. I told you there was going to be a Messiah, and that those who don't follow the Messiah, remember how I said you're going to get cut off from your people if you don't follow him? Well, Jesus is the one, right? Moses was on the Mount of Transfiguration. I think you guys were as well. And so it makes sense. And again, the fact that Elijah was there, one of the greatest prophet maybe, and that makes sense. Well, we don't know. But the point is, who's going to be preaching? 2 people are going to be preaching very effectively. But all Jews getting saved, all Israel getting saved means there are going to be a lot of Jews who say, hell no, they're absolutely not. I am never, no, you can't make me. I don't care if there's an angel flying through the sky. I don't care if there's 144,000 spirit-filled Billy Grahams, Jewish, like Gramsteins or Grambergs or whatever. I don't care. No, you can't make me. And they're going to be right at the end of the tribulation. They've physically made it through all the trauma, and Jesus is about to return to the Mount of Olives, which, Lord willing, will be either on Friday, I think. It's going to be pretty exciting, except if you're about to go to hell. God's going to save every single one of them. Every single one. But they've resisted everything. Exactly. That's the ultimate evidence of grace. Why is he going to do it? Because he said he would. Ask him later. He's going to save all those people. But we don't know who those people are going to be. So we can't say, well, I don't have to share the gospel with the Jewish people because they're all going to get saved. No, just those who survive the Antichrist, the invasion of the beautiful land, all the traumas of you read and you preach Revelation. You don't know who's going to make it. But that's the world that we see, a world that Israel didn't exist for 2,000 years, and now it does. This is one of the most dramatic series of prophecies ever to come true in all of history, and it's come true in our lifetime. And you're sitting in Jerusalem. God called it his city, and he's going to live here right down the street for 1,000 years. And if you don't believe it's 1,000 years, fine. A long, long time. That's amazing. And not everybody gets a chance to come and process it. And we've been trying to process it for since we met and married, and for the last 9 years. And it's been exciting. But the spiritual warfare that comes with this is crazy off the charts.
Our verse of the day today is found in Matthew 28, verse 19. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our prayer requests today are, number one, pray that more people will be open to coming to Israel and willing to experience Israel, give to Israel, and respond to the needs in Israel. And second, pray for ministers and families serving in Israel, that they would be strengthened, protected, and provided for.
I want to say I'm sympathetic to people who believed in a replacement theology pre-48, right? I get it that Augustine didn't get it. I get it that Luther didn't get it. Now, where Luther went was dark and dangerous. He really got a root of bitterness that turned into rampant, virulent anti-Semitism, and wrote a book on the Jews and their lies that led to Hitler saying, great, let's just use this to try to convince Germany that God hates the Jews. Even Luther says it, right? That was bad. But for 1950 years, or let's say 1900 years or so, it was really hard, even for a strong Christian and a biblical literalist, to think that it was literally going to happen, that God was literally going to bring Jews from all over the world to resettle here, to rebuild the ancient ruins, to make the deserts bloom, to create a sovereign nation state called Israel. It was so unthinkable that even when President Harry Truman, who was about to declare U.S. support for the reborn state of Israel on May 14th, 1948, he did that 11 minutes after the state was announced by David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister. But he had to cross out the country. It said that the state of Judea. That's what they were going to call it. And at the last minute, the leadership of Israel now decided, no, let's not call it Judea. We're all Israel now. We're all one. We're reunified, which, by the way, is what Ezekiel 37 says will happen. God was going to take the two and make it one with one leader over it. That's where we are. But even Truman and his advisors, not because of them, but because of the leadership of the nascent state of Judea, was calling it Judea until the last second where they go, no, let's call it Israel. Amazing. Just amazing. So, if the leaders, if Ben-Gurion wasn't planning to call it Israel until the last second, how is Luther supposed to know? How is Augustine supposed to, we look at these scriptures, I look at them and I say, this is literal. But there are many people even today, and you may be in this room. I'm not mad at you if you're like, I don't see it. I think we talked about this a little bit on a phone call that we did. My friend John Piper just doesn't see current Israel as having anything to do with Bible prophecy. This is astonishing to me. But he's wrong, but I love him. So, he's so good on the Great Commission and all the rest of Bible teaching. Why should I pick a fight with John Piper? Yes, I'd like to see him change. And if you have that view, fine. I love you, and I hope you'll think about it differently. But where did that come from? So I'm one of these people who did not grow up in a Messianic congregation. My father was raised Orthodox Jewish. When he went rogue, became very secular, married a Gentile, right? His Jewish mother was furious, offered to buy the engagement ring back from him at a profit to him. Don't marry the non-Jewish girl, right? Yeah, that was quite a brouhaha in the house. So he became an agnostic, and anyway, long story, but when he came to faith in Jesus as Messiah in 1973, he thought he was the first Jew since the Apostle Paul who believed this. He'd never heard of a Jew who believed in Jesus. He'd never met one. And in 1973, there weren't that many. So we never heard about Jews for Jesus. Lynn was on the newsletter, was getting the newsletter because Jews for Jesus had come to her little dead Methodist church in New Jersey and done a Christ in the Passover Seder. And she's like, that's interesting. I want to learn more about that. And she put her little name and address on it. It wasn't little, it was a name. She got the newsletter. She was on the newsletter list. I was a Jew for Jesus. I didn't even know it. I didn't know the organization existed, and we never became directly involved in it. But my point is, then we went to a little evangelical church. They didn't talk about Israel. I didn't hear about Israel. Nobody was like, hey, let's take a trip to Israel. So the good news about that is you can read the Bible and go, hey, I think Israel's important. Who knew? I don't remember a single sermon about this from my pastor, certainly not my Sunday school teachers or my youth group leaders. Ironically, years later, when we started the Josh Fund, my 7th grade youth group leaders we hired them, even though at that time they didn't know anything about Israel or even care, but over time they had, and they helped us found the ministry. So that was good. So I say that to say, I am concerned that a younger generation of evangelicals doesn't understand Israel, doesn't understand why it's important. And a lot of older generation evangelicals also don't understand it. But some of them, because Israel was reborn in their lifetime, they saw Israel almost about to be wiped out in 1967 and then miraculously survive. There's a movie coming out in a couple of weeks called Golda, the story of Golda Meir. I saw an advanced copy this summer when I was on vacation. I'm interviewing the Israeli director of that film for my TBN show in a few weeks. Israel was invaded on Yom Kippur, the highest holy day in the Jewish calendar, 1973 October, right? So 50 years ago, next month or in October, and simultaneously attacked in from both directions, Syria in the north, Egypt in the south. And it got so bad that the chief of staff of the military, you'll see it in the movie. I hope you'll see it. Watch the movie Golda. Helen Mirren plays Golda Meir, and you'll see her chain smoking herself to death, literally. But Moshe Dayan advised her, we got to pull out our nuclear weapons and use them because we're about to lose the whole country. She resists that advice, and Israel survives. But these were the dramatic years where it didn't look like there was going to be an Israel, and then it didn't look like Israel would survive. So the fact that Israel did seemed pretty exciting to a lot of Christians at that time. Like, wow, what is happening? This is amazing. And it was amazing. Some of that's gotten lost, right? So I am concerned. And we talked a little bit on the phone, and maybe we definitely will talk about it for the next few days, at least from me. Again, why is this important to bring back up and make it a major element? But I'll just say for that point, the good news is even if you don't do it, will hold you accountable for not teaching something that's important to him, right? Why is Israel important? Because it's important to God. God chose us. God chose this city. God chose this country. He's rebuilding it. He's doing something so exciting and so dramatic in our time that it's a big mistake to miss it, to not talk about it. You don't have to lead it to everybody getting involved in the political support of Israel, though in a world in which some of the world is turning against Israel, I think defending Israel is an important element in U.S. foreign policy, including of any person running for president or who is president. But I will say, I also think even if you're John Piper or in his world, and you're like, I just don't see the biblical case, Joel. Okay, well then look at it only from the Great Commission case. This is one of the nations. It's the first nation. And we are heading towards a Romans 11:26 world. And even if you disagree with my analysis of exegesis of what that actually means, it still means Jews are going to get saved. So being involved with, not being ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of salvation, power of God for salvation for everyone who believes, to the Jew first, Romans 1:16, then just be involved in Israel for that reason alone. But the good news is, even if you don't teach it, even though you'll be held accountable for it, God will still teach it. And his will won't be thwarted, Job 42. He won't be thwarted. Israel wasn't stopped from being resurrected geopolitically in 1948 because the whole church didn't get it. It didn't get it. Most of the church still doesn't get it, amazingly. You swim in circles probably where the church does get it, so you think that the majority of the church gets it. But if you take all of Roman Catholicism, they don't get it. All mainline Protestantism, they don't get it. And much of Reformed theology doesn't get it. So that's a lot of Christendom. What's left is, sitting in this room. No, just kidding. Yes.
What was your inspiration of the idea? I mean, is it yours originally, or did you read a book?
I read the Bible, and the more I read, the more first, I think the trigger was that I began to realize I'm Jewish. That's a funny story, and I don't want to get into it tonight. Maybe I'll tell it in another couple of days, but I didn't know I was Jewish until the 5th grade. You're like, you must have been the dumbest kid in the class. I mean, Joel Rosenberg, you didn't know? No, I didn't. So that's a funny story. I'll tell it later. But once I realized I'm Jewish and I believe in Jesus and that most of my team doesn't, I thought, well, that's interesting. That's important. Why? Why do I believe? Why has God opened my eyes? And what responsibility do I have to my people? And then I just started studying the scriptures. And I want to say something about how Bible colleges and seminaries teach the Bible, right? Because we're talking to pastors and wives. Even Israel is dropped out of much of our Bible colleges and seminaries. Not that it doesn't get mentioned, but it almost gets mentioned in passing. Think of Bible theology this way. This is not incorrect, but just listen to it. Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. That sounds like the Christian story, right? That's the biblical story. It's true, but you just dropped out the entire story of Israel. You've dropped out Abraham. You've dropped out Isaac. You dropped out Jacob. You dropped out the 12 tribes. You dropped out all the prophecies except messianic prophecies. It just doesn't matter. If you're saying, if the story of the Bible that you're teaching to your congregation or to your children and youth group and whatever is creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, well, of course you don't get Israel. And so much of the churches, that's what they're teaching. They're not even thinking about why is Israel important. Again, we're going to talk about this more, Lord willing, Thursday. But I will say one of the reasons is because Paul says in Corinthians, look to Israel as an example. Not necessarily as a good one. The context of what he's saying is, don't do this, don't do this. See, Israel did that. That's bad. Don't do. Okay, and Stephen tells the entire history of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people in his defense. And why is it recorded in Acts? What does it matter? He was going to get killed anyway. Why is God retelling the story of Israel in the New Testament that we had to remind us that this is an important story? It's central to the story of Christ, and it's central to the story of the church, and it shouldn't be forgotten. It shouldn't be. And why is Paul taking 3 full chapters in the greatest book on theology, the book of Romans? Why is he taking 9, 10, and 11 to talk about God's heart and plan for Israel and the Jewish people? Well, what does it matter if it doesn't matter? It does matter. That's why he's emphasizing it. But even if you go to a church that doesn't teach it, you can still figure it out by reading the Bible. So that was my process. And then, yes, the Lord was clearly stirring me for a life to marry Lynn and to say, all right, well, what is it? How is this going to matter in our personal lives and the starting of the Joshua Fund and so forth? So that was an extra benefit for us. Yeah. Yes, sir.
As the Jews return to Israel, looking forward and in the future, what do you anticipate will happen relationally with your neighbors, with people across the street that want the opposite to happen?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Couple answers. First, there's 2 major answers. First, things are going to get better, and then things are going to get much, much worse. But that's talking from 2023. If you start back in 48, things are going to get horrible, then they're going to get worse, then they're going to get much worse, then they're going to get better, and then they're going to get much, much worse. So that would be the true story of 48 to the return of Christ. But so things were bad on May 14th, 48. 7 Arab nations invaded, right? I mean, there was, we talk about a 2-state solution. The UN voted on something called the partition plan. Let's take Israel, the baby Israel, or the land, let's chop it in half. The Arabs get all this. Israel gets a little bit of this. It wasn't divided equally, but fair enough. I mean, it was divided. This passed December 29th, 1947. And the Jews were like, woohoo, that's not all we want, but we'll take it. Now we have international sanctioned legal legitimacy for the rebirth of the state of Israel. We'll take it. We only get a sliver of Jerusalem. You wouldn't have wanted to be standing here in 1948. But nevertheless, the 7 Arab nations rejected that and invaded. And ever since have been arguing that they have the legal right to create a state. They're like, didn't you forfeit that in 48? Because you said no in 47, and then you tried to kill us in 48, 56, well, not 56, so 67, 73, 82, 87, 91, and then Israel did create peace treaties with the Palestinians. The Oslo Accords, Oslo 1, Oslo 2, and then came the wave of suicide bombers. And so my point is, biblically, there's no such thing as a 2-state solution. I am not, Joshua Fund doesn't take a position. I'm on the record as saying I don't believe in a 2-state solution because of Joel chapter 3. Joel being my favorite book of the Bible. And not because it was short. It's just, I'm like, but in Joel chapter 3, God says very clearly, I will judge all the nations that divide my land. So no matter how wise and thoughtful and fair it feels to take the land and divide it, God says, I'm going to judge any nation that does that. And even our pro-Israel presidents of the United States, Carter did the first Israel-Egypt treaty. That was amazing. But he tried to divide the land. Reagan tried to divide the land. Bush 41, 43, both tried to divide the land. Trump, he was the most pro-Israel president in American history. But his plan actually divides the land. It's the most creative and compassionate version of that, nevertheless tried to divide the land. So it's not, the whole world thinks this is the way to be done. And I don't have another way. That's why everyone thinks, well, there is no other way. But if you read through Genesis 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, where the actual land grant is given, where's the first place that Abraham goes? Shechem, which today is called Nablus, which is one of the strongholds of the Palestinian Authority. So the problem that a believer has is reconciling the fact that God says over and over and over and over and over again, I'm giving all this land, all the land of Canaan. It just says it over and over. There's no way to get around it, except that rarely have we ever really gotten it. Even under David and Solomon, we don't get all that is promised. That won't happen to the millennial kingdom, in my view, under the reign of Jesus. So in the meantime, the question is, how do you handle this? And I will say that while I'm not for it, you're not going to hear me jumping up and down and going, I will caution people, this is a problem. But there is one place where the land is divided. And that is with Abraham and Lot. What happened? Abraham and Lot. I don't know if Abraham should have even brought Lot, but maybe it was an act of compassion for this young man. He was a little bit of a problem. And the Lord did say, leave all your family. But I'm not saying Abraham did the wrong thing. I don't know. But the point is, what happened? Things get so tense between Abraham's team and Lot's team that Abraham says, listen, maybe we should separate. Why don't you pick a part of the land and I'll take whatever you don't take? And this is right after God has told him, this is yours. He could have said, hey, dude, if you want land, go back to Iraq, Mesopotamia. But he doesn't. He says, let's just separate. You do your thing, I'll do my... And so what did he pick? By the way, have you seen the Jordan River on this trip? Yeah? It's hard to see, right? It's very little. But at the time, it was the mighty Mississippi, and all that territory was super lush. And so Lot was like, I'll take the really lush, fertile section. Okay, Abraham was fine with it. And right after Abraham does it, God reaffirms it's still really yours. But that's the only sign I've ever seen, the only principle in the Bible where maybe separating for the sake of peace is okay. It doesn't, I don't think it was the will of God exactly, but God's heart, his emphasis in the New Testament is peace, not land. So where should the church be? I'm just saying it because you're not going to hear it from a lot of Christian Zionists, but I'm a Christian Zionist, and I'm just telling you, that is a biblical principle of peace, right? Seek peace and pursue it. Blessed are the peacemakers. Right? Yeah, I don't have to give a bunch of pastors all the verses about peace. And that's an evidence of maybe separating out the land for peace might work for a while. But of course, it didn't work long term, and it wouldn't work long term now. But that's what was your actual question? Yeah, my point being that it's challenging. What's coming right now is peace. And we talk about, we're not getting into it, but Ezekiel 38, 39, we get to the war of Gog and Magog, that's bad. But right before it, Israel's living securely in the land. So we're in a moment where we've gone from Egypt making a peace treaty, and now I've sat with the president of Egypt, El-Sisi, and he is 5 times, and he's told me every single time how much he loves Israel, how much he loves Bibi Netanyahu, and we got to work more together. I mean, the two countries don't love each other, but Sisi is a huge fan of Israel and a huge fan of Netanyahu. I've sat with the king of Jordan. His people don't love Israel, but he's a man sitting on a volcano, hoping it doesn't erupt. And he's trying to keep peace with Israel, and it's challenging. It's very challenging. We have peace treaties with both of them. 1979 for Egypt, 1994 for Jordan, and now in the late 2020, 4 more, right? UAE, I've sat with the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince of the UAE told me, and an evangelical delegation that sat with him in the palace in Dubai, I'm going to be the next Arab leader to make peace, Joel. When I said, hey, we haven't seen anyone make peace in a while, we're just curious who might it be. That was a boilerplate, hey, he said, it's going to be me. Really? This was almost a year before he did it. And it was huge. I mean, just huge what he did. And that was just announced, that was 3 years ago this week. And then I was at the White House lawn for the actual ceremony where the UAE and Bahrain signed. And we were just in Bahrain with the top leadership last year. And so Morocco has made peace. And Sudan, let's set Sudan aside, that's not going so well. But let's say 3. That's pretty big. So we have 5 Arab-Israeli peace treaties. I think we're heading towards a Saudi peace treaty. Lynn and I have sat with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, shared the gospel with him, pressed him, why don't you have any churches in your country? Come on. There's 1.4 million Christian workers and their families living here in Saudi Arabia. You don't have a single church that's available for them to go to. Now, we've been pressing him on this, and he's not ready yet, but he's making great reforms in many areas, and he wants to make peace with Israel. That's the big topic right now is Biden. But he's now telling people that I know personally, I'm ready to make peace with Israel, but I have to go make peace with Biden first. Biden is so hostile to the Saudis that until I can normalize with Washington, I can't go normalize with Israel. But what I'm saying is the trend right now is towards peace. And if Saudi Arabia and Israel make peace, then we might see a flood of dozens of other Muslim countries make peace. But that's the preamble for it getting much, much, much worse. So that's the short version to that question. But we're called as believers, and certainly the Joshua embraces this, everybody in this region needs Jesus. And all the churches need to be strengthened. And so whether they're a neighbor or an enemy, we're still supposed to love them. How do you do that? That's not easy. But that's what we're working on, and that's what we're about. So, and including with the Palestinians, that is particularly not easy. Yes, Chad.
I don't want to take away anybody's question, but because you and I talked about this, but I thought this was the perfect audience. Could you tell them, Mrs. Joel, you're like part statesman, part diplomat, part ambassador. You're a really ambassador for Christ.
Mostly failed political consultants.
In some places that I can't even fathom yet, everybody's doing y'all, but can you give everybody a little bit of an outline of how your political background prepared you for all of this?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I was no good at politics. And apparently no good at speaking either. I said if they fell asleep, I'd be fine. Walk out. No, it's all good. It's all good. So Lynn and I lived in Washington for 24 years, and for the first 10 years or so, I was involved very heavily in politics, and every candidate I ever worked for lost. Every single one. And I got to know Iowa reasonably well because I helped Steve Forbes lose there. And New Hampshire, more, I know, yeah. So I think, we won Delaware, but that was before I got on the team. So in 96, Steve Forbes won Delaware and then Arizona, and then hired me, and then was out of the race in 2 weeks. Yeah, you're laughing because it's not your resume, but if it was, yeah. And then I worked for him 4 years. We lost in 2000 to George W. I love, one of the things I loved about W was that great line, if Al Gore really invented the internet, then how come it starts with W? I thought that was a great line. Oh, we couldn't win. Anyway, so the Lord started me in D.C., started me in Washington, and then once I had completely, face planted, then he started taking me out. Now, I don't think I really was the responsible one for all those people losing. I helped, I worked for Jack Kemp and Bill Bennett. Kemp in 92 was far and away the leading contender, and then decided not to run once I joined the team. And then they thought, well, Bennett will run instead, and then he didn't run. That's why Steve Forbes ran in 96. But anyway, I was once on Pat Buchanan's TV show on MSNBC. They canceled it the next day. And I was once on Huckabee's show on Fox. He announced his resignation that night. It's like, oh my gosh. We realized recently, I've been telling this joke for years. These are all true, but I worked for Bibi Netanyahu on his comeback campaign in 2000. He was prime minister from 96 to 99, lost his re-election to Ehud Barak, and then he was putting a comeback campaign team together in the fall of 2000 to come back. I joined, and he was out of the race by December. And it was just so, and he didn't come back for 9 more years, okay? So, and then we recently realized that when we moved to Virginia, when we got married in 1990, we moved to Virginia, it was a blazing red state. And then it became super blue. And then we moved, and now it's red again under Youngkin. I'm like, oh my gosh, this never ceases. So all the political candidates I've ever met, I've told them, listen, I am here for spiritual advice, Israel. You do not want me helping on the politics side, just being honest. So, but God, I think, used that experience, those experiences, for several things. In one part, I think, well, to write novels, I became a political thriller writer, and I found that making things up for a living was much easier than running for, helping people run for office. And that really became so successful with selling 5 million copies of the books and all the doors that have opened to speak and to, meet with people all over the world, the world leaders and national leaders and that read the books and so forth. That became a whole life, a whole career, a whole ministry. So I think the Lord first he was wringing out political ambition, selfish ambition out of me. Not enough of it yet, but still working on it. Second, I think he was teaching me a culture, the good, the bad, and the ugly, of politics generally, Washington in particular. I think he was using it as a base camp. I thought that Washington, D.C. was the Mount Everest of spiritual warfare until we moved here. And then I realized that actually D.C. is base camp 1. We're not even, you're just trying to acclimatize to move on. But I also think that 2 other things have come out of it. One is, so a big part of what I do is I'm fascinated with Bible prophecy. I'm fascinated with eschatology. I never try to hold it again. I don't want to be somebody who will break fellowship because of Bible prophecy. That's very important to me. And I also don't spend a lot of time on bowls and trumpets and revelation. It's important, but it's for a time that I'm not going to be around for. So I'm curious about all the prophecies that are about leading up to this moment and this moment between here and the rapture and, and the rebirth of Israel and all of that. How did that motivate me to fulfill the Great Commission, to do my part, for Lynn and me to do our part? Because you can't just say, oh, there's going to be all kinds of judgment and wars and traumas in the Middle East. And isn't that interesting? You could think that. But then the question is, people are going to die and they're going to suffer. And where are they going to go when they die? And is the church here strong enough, healthy enough to reach its people, reach their, not just Israel, but in Jordan and Lebanon and Syria? And how can we be involved in helping today? We have a very applied, a very practical type of eschatology, I think. And I was dear friends, Lynn and I were dear friends with Tim and Beverly LaHaye. I learned so much from him. So eventually I did meet him and I asked him 1,000 questions and he did have a great passion for the Great Commission, and I love that. But I also think he let himself get involved in a lot of skirmishes with people over bowls and trumpets and timing that I don't know that I necessarily disagree with most of his actual positions. I don't have the same approach. He was a pretty dogmatic person, although he was super loving and super kind and generous to us, and we couldn't be more grateful to he and his wife. But I think what was happening with me with Rush Limbaugh, and I helped Sean Hannity on his first book, and Tim LaHaye, these are strong cups of tea. And I was really learning. It was like a graduate program in communications of political thinking, but also biblical eschatology. And then I was asking the Lord through those years, okay, but I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with every style that Rush has. I love the humor and the details, but I don't want to be a mocker of people. And by the way, I prayed for Rush for years, and he did get saved really late in the game. And we had a friend that discipled Lynn in college who loved Rush, she and her husband, but you said, oh, I love Rush. I'm praying that he gets saved, but not yet, because he's just so funny and he's so mean to the liberals. I just don't want him to get saved yet, because then he'll have to be nice. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, so if I think of Rush, I think of Sean, I think of Tim LaHaye. I know that's a funny group of people, but the question was, I loved, and I would add to that, Netanyahu and Steve Forbes and Jack Kemp and Bill Bennett. These are strong thinkers. They're strong communicators. I love that. To me, I'm glad that I never went to graduate school. None of the classes at Harvard, Georgetown, or I don't know, let's think of schools I could have gotten into. Anyway, lower than that. But none of that would have been interesting as working with and for these people. But at the same time, my process was, but I'm not them, and how do I communicate ideas that are super important without trying to mimic or even take styles that I'm not sure are going to work? We talked about this a little bit at dinner. If your life is involved in Jewish ministry, Muslim ministry, biblical eschatology, let's just stop there. You want to add partisan politics to it. Now, I have strong partisan, I think you've heard a little bit of my background. And by the way, I was a Democrat in college. I heckled Dan Quayle in Syracuse when he came to the War Memorial in 1988. Anyway, so I voted for Al Gore in the 88 primaries in New York. I voted for Dukakis. And somehow in 88, dating Lynn, we never talk about politics. I have no idea how that happened. It's like the pillar of cloud came down, and because I was very political, and I thought I was a liberal, and I'm not going to get into that whole story right now, but my point is, on our honeymoon, we were in Maine, and we were just having such a great time, and as we got through the week, she says, well, we're moving to Washington. I guess I ought to register to vote. I'm like, register to vote? You've never voted before? She goes, no. I said, why? How have you never? I don't know. It was never political. Okay. She goes, so well, now we're going, so I guess I ought to get involved. What party should I register for? Now, I was like, well, obviously, but I didn't say, I thought, well, I'm a husband. I'm for 4 days. I want to be magnanimous. Let her come to her own conclusions. It's obvious what she'll become. But so I said, well, I'm not going to just tell you, but let me give you a little test. See if you're conservative or liberal. And then it'll be obvious to you. So I gave her a test. She turned out to be a 98.967 rock solid conservative. And she goes, I guess I'll be a Republican. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's not talk about this for the rest of the trip. So we get down to Washington, and I come home from work on day one. She's going to take the summer just to kind of settle in. She opens the door to our little apartment, red, white, and blue bunting, and she's got a big Reagan Bush 84 bringing America back button. I'm like, whoa, what is happening? I said for better or for worse. I said for richer or for poor. I did not say for Republican. Chad Conley. But I was like, what are you doing? She goes, what are you talking about? Like, this is who I am. And, okay, maybe they're idiots in some of the leadership, but, this is closer than that team. I said, what? So she goes, well, let me give you that test. I'm like, wow, okay. So, and sure enough, I was pretty close to her. But anyway, so I'm just saying I went through quite a metamorphosis. And in that metamorphosis, I had to tell that to Rush when I had my interview to be his research director, because I just thought if one of the staff finds out, they're going to blackmail me. You're a Democrat. You voted for Dukakis. I'm like, ugh. So I told him that. He laughed so hard. He goes, you're the exact type of person that I'm trying to reach. A young idiot who doesn't understand, thinks he's so sophisticated as a Democratic liberal, but actually, starts looking at his paycheck and going, what? And the values, you're just not connecting it. Because you're who I'm trying to reach. And so my point is, I tried over the next number of years to say, how do these various communicators try to figure out how to communicate and how to persuade? And of these very challenging topics that I have on the plate that God has put in front of me, how am I supposed to communicate? And do I have to get rid of all my political views? Or how do I handle it? Anyway, so I would say, all that to say, I would say Washington was a graduate education in communications. I will say this last part, looking at how political debates are held in Washington and how you're attacked and how counterattacks happen, I realize when it comes to Bible eschatology, if I was in seminary, I'm not saying I'm not anti-seminary, I'm not anti-Bible college, I'm not. But I'm saying for me, I think if I went there to learn what I ended up learning on my own and through reading a lot of books and asking people like Tim LaHaye and others, I think people run the risk of talking the way they're being taught. And they're thinking in the culture. I would use even a political analogy. Think of the difference between the way Marco Rubio talks and the way Ted Cruz talks. Meaning, like they both have basically the same positions on a lot of things. I'm not, let's not get into everything, but just talk about how they talk. Well, one lives in Florida, and Florida until now was a swing state. So you had to talk differently. You had to think differently on how to communicate to people who aren't Texans. Ted Cruz gets away with being Ted Cruz, not because it's not insincere, it's totally him, but I just mean he works in Texas because it's Texas. But it doesn't work in Florida. It doesn't work in swing states because it's sharp and it's definitive and it's like you're an idiot if you don't believe this. And it doesn't work in a swing state. Now, most of you live in swing states or key states. The reason I'm saying it is because even Christians don't believe in Bible prophecy. They don't read it. They don't teach it. They don't study it. And even if they're interested, they're like, it's too controversial. I don't want to talk about it. Well, it's 27% of the Bible, so it's sort of important. But if you're going to talk about it, how do you talk about it? How do you engage people in a way that doesn't act like this is obvious and you're a moron if you don't see it? That's not going to work when most of Christendom doesn't even want to talk about it. And then what if there's persuadables? There's a lot of persuadables. It's the word of God. But how are you going to do it? And I would say the last part is talking about Israel. Looking at all my experience in how various political people talk about their issues, and then trying to think, all right, well, what am I learning? Or why am I not at Dallas Seminary or Moody or Biola or Talbot or whatever? Or yes, I'm sorry, some Baptist schools are really good too, Southern, Southwest, whatever. Don't get me wrong. They're like, oh, I see where he is. So if you think about Israel, why do many people, let's take Reformed theologians or people in the Reformed world, why do they often, like John Piper, not see this? Well, they think of people who talk about Israel as John Hagee. They see it as shrill. They see it as political. They see it as partisan. They see it as Texas. They don't see it as thoughtful. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to throw John under the bus, although John has a certain style that is not winsome to everybody. But I'm also saying there are other elements that people are like, well, how come you're talking about Israel all the time? Don't you even care about the Palestinians? What about the Jordanians? What about the Egyptians? Don't Muslims count? Aren't God supposed to care for Muslims and Arabs? And yes, he does. Well, if you've got top Christian Zionist leaders who don't ever talk about in love and compassion about Arabs or Muslims, it's going to sound like we don't love them, which we do and we should. So then I thought, well, what are the other issues? Well, young people they don't really care about the theology, unfortunately, primarily. They want to say, are you doing anything to help people? Well, like humanitarian relief. Like, that's important. Aren't you caring for people? Yes, you want to teach them and you want to communicate to them, but what are you doing just to show the love of Jesus, right? So I think Lynn and I even though Lynn persuaded me to change teams, she also is a person who is a very thoughtful and discerning communicator, much less shrill, much less Jewish, because she's not Jewish, than me. So all of that, and having been in Washington and seeing what she liked and what she didn't, and seeing in the church what she likes, but a lot of it, we spent a lot of time thinking about what is really true from the Bible, and how are we supposed to not only live it, but how are we supposed to talk about it? And the Joshua Fund is an exercise in trying to figure that out, because too many teams are either or. They're either super pro-Israel, and you'll never hear a nice word about Israel's neighbors or enemies, or they're super anti-Israel and super pro the neighbor, and they get the theology of Israel wrong. It's not that their heart for the neighbor is wrong. It's that they become so hostile to Israel's weaknesses, that they're blind to the weaknesses of the other side, and they're not realizing God gets the weaknesses. He wrote this book. He knows how his team is not doing well. The question is, how do we engage people on both sides to consider what they don't want to consider? The truth of Jesus as being the Messiah and the only way. And how do we help the church that's stuck in the middle, weak, unprayed for, uncared for, underfunded, under-resourced in other ways? how do we help them be stronger, healthier, able to go do the mission that God has called them to? That intrigues us. It fascinates us. And I think in some weird way, and I know I went longer probably with that answer, but I haven't been asked it ever, I don't think. I think that's what Washington, I think, has actually helped us on this journey. I'm sure there's been harm as well.
And so I'm curious, you have this practical, tangible approach to all of Israel and the salvation. What is your perspective of the practical, tangible side of the fullness of the Gentiles?
Great question. Short answer, Lynn's like, this should be it. And she's got a good sense of discernment. Like, she literally has a gift of discernment, and I have the gift of obliviousness. So mostly the women that are laughing there, I see that, because the men are like, wait, what did he say? I know it's your life verse, you women. God bless you, like the whole road to Emmaus, oh, you foolish men, I'm slow of heart to believe. I know that's, okay. The short answer to your question is, I believe the fullness of the Gentiles is often misunderstood and mistaught as like, well, now Israel has been reborn, so we must be at the fullness of the Gentiles, or something like that's not accurate. The fullness of the Gentiles will be that moment in the tribulation when God sovereignly decides, I've reached every Gentile that is going to get it. And now before I send Jesus back, the Father's going to pour out his fountain of grace on this Jewish cohort that has resisted, even when many Jews came to faith, and then other Jews didn't come to faith but have already died. And now you've got this group that have held on and said, no. But they've survived, and now they're just about to go to hell when Jesus comes back, but they're not going to go to hell. But the fullness of the Gentiles, more people come to faith during the tribulation than maybe in all of the rest of the last 2,000 years combined, right? We see the Apostle John writes that it's a number that he can't count. It's so high, the number of people who come to faith during the tribulation. But we know just flip a page, and he counts 200 million demonic creatures of some sort, right? So he knows how to count high. He knows how to get at least to 200 million. So he's not an idiot, but he's saying the number of people who come to faith during that tribulation 7-year period is a number so far north of 200 million so I think the fullness of the Gentiles comes in during the tribulation, right? We see it in Revelation 7, right? We see these multitudes from every nation, tribe, and tongue. These are not just people who got saved over the last 1900 years. This is now, or 2000, this is now specifically people who are getting saved during the tribulation. So I think the Great Commission, we need to try to reach every person in the world. We're not going to make it before the rapture. The rapture isn't the end of the process. It's the acceleration of the process. That's the great irony, is to remove the church and then you're going to get the job done. But the church has a mission that we are not going to achieve, but we're getting closer and closer. And there's certainly different ways to account. If you're talking about individual heart languages, yeah, we've got a lot more small but important languages to get to. But if you talk about languages that people probably also speak, Mandarin, Spanish, French, Russian, English, a lot of people can hear the gospel in some way, shape, or form that never could before. So we've come a long way. We got to keep pressing, and maybe God's going to give us several hundred years, but maybe he's only going to give us, a smaller, shorter period. I tend to think it's a shorter amount of time before the rapture, but who knows? It'd be great if it was happening tonight or tomorrow. But I don't believe that the fullness of the Gentiles coming into the kingdom happens until that angel has flown through the sky. You got the 2 witnesses, you got the 144,000 and so forth. It's very, very late in the game in the 7th year, that 70th week. And now all these things that have happened, horrible things, but the horrible things have been, partly it's judgment, obviously, it says it's judgment. Partly it's the wrath of the Lamb, right? That is judgment. But it's also God's mercy that he's literally and figuratively shaking the world so that you have to make a decision. You're for Jesus or you're against him. Everyone will have heard by the end of the tribulation, everyone will know this is my choice. And some will just say, I know, I'm never going to do it. I'd rather have a rock fall on me and kill me. I'm never going to follow Jesus. But others are going to, and so there's going to be no middle ground. We live in a world with followers of Jesus and anti-followers of Jesus, and then mostly it's a mass, mushy middle. That middle is going to collapse, and you're going to have to break one way or the other. And by breaking for Jesus before the tribulation, you probably get to avoid martyrdom. Breaking for Jesus during the tribulation, you're almost certainly saying, I I know I need Jesus so much that even if they kill me, I have to do this. And you're right. When you get to that moment where God in his sovereignty has saved every Gentile you possibly, I mean, I can't, let's not get into the sovereignty of God tonight at this late hour, but everybody that is going to come into the kingdom who's a Gentile, that's the fullness of the Gentiles. And then the next verse kicks in. Now we save all the rest of the Jews all at once, boom, and then we're out. Close the curtain, open a new chapter, right? So that's the only way those verses and all the rest of the verses work. I've heard it taught other ways, but it's like taking the pieces of a 5,000 piece puzzle and trying to cram them together. It doesn't really work. Not a sermon, just a thought.
We're interested. I love the practicality of how you're seeing Romans 11:26. I was just interested if you have any practical observations of Romans 11:25 taking place. Yeah, it has to happen before Israel does.
It does, and that's why my dispensationalist friends, mentioning Dallas as the seminary as an example, have struggled with, do Jews get saved before the tribulation? Obviously we do. And by the way, I would say the flip side is for replacement theologians. If replacement theology is true, what is replacement theology? And I know, I think Jeff, you haven't taught on it yet.
I'm about to tell that very line tomorrow.
All right, well, I don't know if you know what line I'm saying, but repetition in messaging is good. If God abandoned the Jews and the nation of Israel at the cross, how did the disciples get saved? Were they saved at the cross? They were not. We see in John 20 when he breathed the Holy Spirit on them. They do not get it. They're disciples, but they are not believers. They just don't quite get it until the Holy Spirit enters them, John 20, after the resurrection. How did Paul get saved? Oh, so let's say the disciples were. How did Paul get saved? He hated the followers of Jesus, and he hated Jesus after the cross. How does he get saved? How does a replacement theologian answer that question? He doesn't. How does he answer Romans 9, 10, 11, written by that Paul, who shouldn't even be a believer? How are the million Jews who believe now? Okay, so this is why, those are obvious reasons why not. To flip it back around and to land the plane, I think, let's just end it there. But I'm open to, if that stirs more interest in you, we can do some Q&A in the Garden Tomb area as well. And of course, you're going to hear from Jeff. Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening to this episode about Joel's family moving to and staying in Israel. It's a challenge, and yet God is faithful. If you found this podcast valuable, please get in touch with us. Let us know who you are. Do you want to talk about something else on this show? Do you have a question you want Joel to answer? Please send any comments you have to podcast@joshuafund.net. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us as we develop this podcast. And as always, you can check out our show notes for anything you heard on the podcast that you'd like more information on. For Joel Rosenberg and the Joshua Fund ministry team, I'm Carl Moeller. Thanks for listening to Inside the Epicenter with Joel Rosenberg.
I'm Joel Rosenberg. On your left, you'll find some videos we've chosen specifically for you. We look forward to partnering with you to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus.